Hello viewers, today we discuss the topic forest biodiversity, the forest service functions that they provide us with, conservation of forests, tropical evergreen and semi-evergreen forest. In this module, detailed biodiversity descriptions will be given on the forest service ecosystem functions, the conservation of the forest, how these forests can be conserved, the type of forest, and among the types we choose two of them today, that is a tropical evergreen rainforest and the semi-evergreen forest. Forests around the world constitute a wide variety of habitats. They are basically the lifeline of a number of people, and along the banks of the river banks and the forest we find a number of inhabitations. So, the forest destructions and degradation of the forest is of serious concern. Two-thirds of the world's plants, terrestrial species are mainly found in these diverse forests. So, India alone has endemic varieties and is home to a number of flora and fauna which are found in our different types of forest systems. So, the biodiversity of forest refers to all the living organisms that inhabit the forested land and their areas and the ecological roles that they play in a system. So, that is why forests are known as lifelines of a system. The basic functions that a forest provide us with include the production or giving us oxygen, food, shelter, traditional medicines, recreation, spiritual sustenance. They check global warming by using up the carbon dioxide for photosynthesis. They are a source of whole range of forest products which are of economic importance, the pharmaceuticals, fuel, paper, rubber and clothing. So, the forest canopy provides us a good shelter for the flora, the fauna and also for the human life. The traditional medicines, the people residing in or near the forest have good knowledge on the medicinal benefits of different species that are found in these forests. For example, in the treatment of hypertension, digitalis purpurea is a hypertension drug which are taken from the forest. The same way, more and more people are now turning towards organic or the green way of living, and a number of medicine without side effect, including for diabetes, for increasing your eye vision, for vitamins, are coming up from the forest source alone. They are a place for recreation and for spiritual sustenance, like you want to meditate or have that kind of aura, then forests provide you those services. Global warming, the more and more we go in for deforestation, we see that the temperatures are going higher year by year. So, they check the global warming by using up the carbon dioxide for photosynthesis. Again, in the pharmaceutical industry, for fuel and for paper, rubber and clothing, for organic fabric is one of the important landmark, and people are going on to this. The Fab India is also marketing the organic cloth products. So, forests are those that provide us with these wonderful things. The data of the FAO shows that the forest and forest soil, they store nearly 1 trillion tons of carbon, that is twice the amount that is found in the atmosphere. The World Bank estimates that 2/3 of the world's species alone live in the forest alone. So, that is really a high number. The deforestation of tropical rainforest could lead to the loss of more than 100 species a day. So, I do not know why we are going for deforestation and privatization, like we are giving the forest for the private industries or for privatization of these degraded forests. Why are we doing this? Even if the canopy cover of a forest is less, for example, in the grasslands or the wetlands, still they provide critical service functions. So, the 2/3 of the world's species also live in these forest systems. So, that is a very good amount and it is a lifeline for a number of species. According to the estimates of the World Bank in 2004, 60 million indigenous people are almost entirely dependent on forest. Now, this may be for the fuel wood, for the timber or for their sustenance. 350 million people rely on forest for subsistence and income. So, they also generate income or livelihood opportunities. So, the people residing there or the local farmers can grow their crops or they can do ornamental farming practices, or they can come up with some other eco enterprise. It is also something very good for women empowerment schemes. The bamboo and other forest products which are available are made into canes or jute kind of ropes, or some kind of simple ornamental things where you can keep your fruits or your vegetable, that they are called as baskets. So, they provide a number of people for income and income generated occupations. 1.3 million people depend on the agroforestry farming services, that is agriculture and farming. So, a number of people depend on the agroforestry farming systems in the forest ecosystems. India ranks 10th among the most forested nations of the world, and India alone has 19.5 to 20% of its total geographic area under the forest and tree cover. However, this is far below the national target of 33% for the plains and 66% for the hilly areas. So, India has a large amount of the total geographic area under the forest and forest cultivation. Here again we find the open forest and the closed forest, and those forests which have less than 10% of the canopy cover have been called as the degraded forest. So, these degraded forests are being used for other purposes. That is, the Ministry of Environment and Forest and Climate Change recently has taken up an initiative to convert or give these degraded forests, that is which have less than 10% of the canopy cover, to the paper and the pulp industry, a private industry. And this move, as I said earlier, is not favorable, because even if it has less than 10% canopy cover, the grasslands and the wetlands which have a very less canopy cover have critical species, endangered and vulnerable species which are at the verge of extinction and are threatened, and they also provide us critical service functions like the biogeochemical cycling of nutrients, checking the floods. They act as sponges or kidneys of the landscape. So, this is not a good move that we convert all the degraded forests under this category and giving them for the privatization. So, here again we need to look into this matter. The cultural services that we obtain from the forest ecosystem are through spiritual enrichment, cognitive development, reflection and recreation, scientific discoveries. Very great scientific discoveries, at least in science and in the biological sciences, come from the forest. Aesthetics, knowledge systems, social relations, aesthetic values. Forest biodiversity is a basis for spiritual identity of many indigenous people throughout the world. So, the scientific discovery, when it comes to this, even now the biologists are often fascinated by these forest systems. They go in search of different species. For example, neem is an antimicrobial and antibacterial agent. The same with turmeric and the black seed oil capsules that we find today. So, they are also the black seeds, again for antioxidants. So, there are so many discoveries coming up from the biological laboratories, and this forest is the natural open ecology lab where a number of experiments are conducted, and it is to the benefit of mankind. Provisioning services. The products obtained from forest alone include the genetic sources, timber is very good, we find different timber found in a different forest, food and for fiber, the pharmaceutical industry, for energy requirement, again the forest products are used for energy and the energy requirement. The forests are the basis of over 5,000 commercial products. So, these are the provisioning services that the forests provide us with. Regulating services. So, this mainly includes the biogeochemical cycling of the nutrients, purification of water and air, crop pollination, regulation of climate and water. So, the climate regulation and water regulation, cycling of the water is all regulating services naturally done by the forest ecosystems. Pest and disease control. In nature there is a predator-prey relationship, and it is not necessary that we have to intervene and use the chemical or the herbicides and pesticides, but nature itself has a check and control to control the pest and the disease problems. 2/3 of all the major cities in developing countries depend on the forest watersheds and protected areas for their drinking water supplies. Supporting services, the ecosystem services are necessary for the production of other ecosystem services. So, that is why they are termed as supporting services. Now, primarily they are important in biomass production, for the production of atmospheric oxygen, soil formation and retention, the nutrient cycling and water cycling, provisioning of the habitats. Biodiversity is a basis and the engine for all these ecosystem services. So, it is a service which is necessary for supporting other ecosystem services. So, in nature one thing does not occur alone, but every system independently is connected with each other, and it is like a teamwork. They all work together, and that is how we are able to live in peace. Now, coming on to the conservation of the tree species. So, we have seen how the forest provide us with a wealth of things. How do we conserve these forests and the tree species? This is a picture of Ipomia, which was captured in nature reserve at Mumbai. So, although the threats to the survival of the forest dwelling species, for example, the tigers or the giant pandas are well known, but many people are unaware of the very degrading situation of, or the harmful situation of some of the world's trees. So, the trees are also being threatened for timber and for other ecological or other man induced roles. The world's list of threatened trees in 1998, this indicates that 8,000 species, more than 8,000 tree species, and 10% of the world's total of the tree species are currently threatened with extinction. So, there are 4 stages what we called as vulnerable, endangered, critically endangered and extinct. So, extinct is the last stage. After that we do not find that organism or that species in nature. So, we find so many species and 10% of the total are threatened with this title of extinction. So, that means we cannot see them anymore. Many economically important tree species, that is the species of pine, oak, fir, cedar, mahogany and meranti, are threatened due to unsustainable use. More than 1 in the 6 mangrove species worldwide is on the IUCN red list of the threatened species. So, again mangrove species also they have a number of flora and fauna, and one of the mangrove species is very important for treating the lepers or the leprosy syndrome. So, this also is under the red list of the threatened species, and it is high time that the local communities along with the state, NGO and the government organization go hand in hand to protect these forest services. So, they are in danger of extinction because of what are the factors? So, these factors include coastal development, climate change, logging and for agriculture. So, these are some of the factors that aggravate the danger of extinction of these species. To promote the conservation of the tree species, the UN, the United Nations Environment Programme, UNEP, World Conservation Monitoring Center, they initiated a global tree conservation atlas in the year 2003, and this presents a whole list of the threatened tree species. Now, in this figure we see a red dahlia. So, these are some of the flowers which are so nice to the perceiver's eye, and conservation of these tree species, both shrubs, plants and herbs should be an integral part of every person, so that we know the importance of each and every species in the world. Sustainable management of forests. So, we have seen what are the services that the forests provide us with, how they can be conserved, and we need to sustainably manage these forests. So, the forest and the resources derived from them need to be managed in a sustainable manner using measures that conserve resources while they will continue to provide the economic benefits and various services. So, you can use the forest, but at the same time you need not cut them down, or you need not completely let go of the forest. They should continue to provide the benefits and the various services. So, that these should go hand in hand without causing any destruction to the forest. We can use the benefits that are derived from them. Again, the sustainable forest management, like for example the joint forest management or afforestation things, should aim at conserving the forest the wide range of species as possible and endangered species of plants, animals and microorganisms which are not visible to the naked eye, but these microorganisms also provide nutrients and detritus for the higher organisms in the food chain and the food web. So, they are also an integral part of the food system. Forest management practices should take into account the demands of sustaining biodiversity. So, forest management practices, this includes, as I said, joint forest management practices. This can include participatory approach of the forest management practices, where the local communities work along with the NGOs, the state or the central government agencies, and they are able to tell them about the importance of that local variety of the plant or the animal or the organism, and bring out, manage these systems properly by taking out a flow chart or bringing out a policy or a change in sustaining the biodiversity of these systems. Another important aspect of diversity rich forestry is the conservation of key biotopes. So, these key biotopes are valuable, they are often small scale habitats, they are high in natural diversity that should either be left undisturbed or managed with special care. Key biotopes can be important for the conservation of many species. They can facilitate the species dispersal within managed forest landscapes. So, the key biotopes are very important for the conservation of a large number of species. All forest areas have some role in the conservation and forest biodiversity. So, the conservation of these systems is essential if we have to reap the benefits of the protected forest, the semi-natural management of forest and plantation forest having the elements of forest biodiversity. So, this means that if we have to reap the benefits of these forests, we need to take care of them properly, and we should see that we enjoy them today and also for our future generation. That is the whole aim of the sustainable development and sustainable development goal and the policy, that we continue to reap the benefits today and we also keep them for the future generations by not degrading them, but using them wisely and conserving them properly. Protected forest areas are of special interest because their main objective is the conservation of forest biological diversity. Again, these areas should also be managed along with the surrounding areas because the forests are not static in time. The semi-natural management of forest and plantation forest are important in maintaining many elements of forest biological diversity and producing the goods and the ecosystem services. So, plantation forest, or we need to enhance biodiversity of plantation forest, and for this a very conscious effort has to be made by all of us. Maintaining all the characteristics of a natural forest landscape, the forest structure in managed forest is next to impossible. So, that is why we have the nature reserves, and these reserves are protected areas of importance where wildlife, flora, fauna and features of geological interest. So, they are also eco-geological heritage places where they provide a foundation and they play a significant role in the conservation of forest biodiversity. So, rather than we take our children to a forest as such, it may be difficult for us to see which plant is what, and to identify them in a natural forest. For example, in the forest of Meghalaya, which is a densely forested region, and here many of the plants, for example near the cave systems, Meghalaya is an abode of clouds and a land of areas with a number of caves, and this densely, and the caves normally occur within the dense forested regions. So, there the natural forest which occur, it has not been written on those trees what type of plant or species it is. But when we take our children to these nature reserves or parks, for example the Bronx Zoo in the New York, so here every flora or the fauna has been detailed, it has been written, the species, the family with which it belongs to has been detailed, and whether it has any medicinal or geological value. So, this way we can get a better understanding of the species themselves and we indirectly are able to play a role in propagating or telling other people to say that the forests are important for the human lifeline, and every species in the forest have a significant role to play in the conservation of biodiversity. Now, these are some elephants which are elephant reserves that are found in our country also, but this special photograph was photographed at on the way to Bangkok in Thailand. Without nature reserves, so in these nature reserves or elephant reserves, we find the endangered or vulnerable species being protected in their natural environment. They are not being caged, but they are being protected in their natural surrounding or environment. So, without the nature reserves, several species and ecological groups may disappear or decrease, and they can lose their viability, their functional significance can be lost in their forest ecosystem. So, as I said, maybe the nature reserves and parks are one form where we can take steps to grow these special plants and protect them in their natural surrounding, and we educate the younger generation and we impart the knowledge about the wonderful forest ecological services and benefits that they provide us, and in turn we are able to protect the forest in the natural system also. Remote sensing methods are other methods which are used to assess the changes in tree species, composition, age and class of the trees. Besides traditional data on the area of the forest types, we also need the data on carbon sequestration, biological diversity, environmental protection, forest conditions, damage, protective and socio-economic functions. So, other than the traditional data, these data are also important in order to develop a chart or a compilation of data for conserving the forest systems. The status of forest in India, India alone is a home to great diversity of the forest, and they cover 2.4% of the world's geographic area and support 17% of the world's population, 18% of the livestock population of our country, and they meet 40% of the domestic fuel requirement and supply 30% of the country's fodder. So, this is the status of the forest in India, in our country. Now, India has a variety of forest. We have this evergreen tropical rainforest, semi-evergreen rainforest, deciduous monsoon forest, thorn forest, subtropical pine forest, temperate montane forest and dry alpine scrub. In this module, we will be discussing about the evergreen tropical rainforest and semi-evergreen rainforest. Tropical wet evergreen rainforest, as the name indicates, they are wet all the time, so the dry season is distinctly short. This is the forest where the annual rainfall exceeds 250 centimeters. The annual temperature ranges between 25 and 27 degrees centigrade. The average annual humidity is more than 77%. The dry season is distinctly short because it is a tropical wet evergreen rainforest. The characteristics, they are evergreen, so the leaves are there all through and they are totally green. Due to high heat and high humidity, the trees of these forests do not shed their leaves together. They have mesophytic plants, and these plants are actually adapted to neither too dry or neither too wet type. So, that is a category of the plants that these forests are categorized by. The lofty trees, they often reach 45 to 60 meters in height. So, they are really very tall. They have a thick canopy. From the air, if you have an aerial view of these forests, they appear like a thick canopy, and it is broken only where it is crossed by large rivers or cleared for cultivation. The plants of commercial importance include the coffee, chocolate, banana, mango, papaya, avocado and the sugar cane, which are used to grow in the rainforest and are largely cultivated on the plantations that were once forest. The tropical rainforests are found in the foothills of eastern Himalayas, northeastern states, western Ghats, the Andaman and Nicobar Islands and in Orissa. The timber is hardwood, it is fine grained, hard and durable, it is of high commercial value. The important species of these forests are mahogany, white cedar, jamun and bamboo. The rainforest of the Assam Valley, this has the Shorea species and Diptocarpus, and the Shorea robusta is a dominant species which are abundant in this region. Again in the Andaman and the Nicobar Islands we find the Diptocarpus species, the Dalbergia species, Terminalia species, and the Diptocarpus kerrai is dominant on the southern parts of the archipelago of the Andaman and the Nicobar Islands. The Western Ghat also has a rich variety of the tree species like teak, the Indian rosewood, Indian kino and the crocodile bark. The semi-evergreen forests are extensive than the rainforest because they tend to degrade to semi-evergreen with the human interference. Again, the tropical rainforest can be divided into tropical moist and tropical dry forest. The tropical moist forest can be categorized into tropical moist evergreen, tropical moist semi-evergreen, which we are covering in this topic. The moist evergreen, which has already been said, the rainfall is actually quite high, around 250 centimeter, and they have very long or tall trees. Some shrubs and lianas, the woody climbers are found, and epiphytes are also abundant in these forests due to high rainfall. The tropical moist semi-evergreen forest, these are also transitional forests between the wet evergreen and the tropical deciduous, and they are drier areas compared to the wet evergreen. They are found in the western coast, eastern Orissa, Assam, and they are characterized by luxuriantly growing intermixed deciduous species and evergreen species of the trees and the plants. Here again they are characterized by many species, they are less dense and they have the buttressed trunks which have abundant epiphytes. These are some of the plants like rosewood, thorny bamboo, the Terminalia, the bambusa and the Ixora species, cinnamon, the orchids and ferns and several other herbs are also common in these forests. So 2011 was declared as the International Year of the Forest by the General Assembly, and it is a very significant contribution that the forest can play to humanity in the eradication of poverty and for achieving the sustainable development goals. In India also the Forest Day or the Vana Mahotsav is celebrated in all the states, and social forestry programs where tree planting is done along the roadsides is being done, and this is an important step. There have been grassroots movements, or for example the Chipko movement in our country, which was led by the Gaura Devi in the 1970s in Uttarakhand, where the women hugged the trees. Chipko itself means the hugging or the embracing step, where they hugged the trees and they stopped the eradication or the breaking of degradation of the forest. So the women were very important in the protection of these forests. And the Chipko people, at least they saved around 1 lakh trees from excavation. The World Forestry Day is celebrated on the 21st of March every year, and this was celebrated around the globe for more than 30 years, and it is basically in order to understand the importance and the value of forest and the forestry to community. And later in different forums, the event actually could contribute to a great extent to the general public about informing and knowledge upgradation of the general public about the importance of forest and how it should be observed every year around the globe. So in this module today, dear viewers, we have been seeing about the forest diversity, the forest ecosystem service functions that they provide us with, the conservation of the forest and how we can sustainably manage these critically endangered species and the species that are going to be extinct in another 10 or 20 years, and about sustainably managing these ecosystems and the types of forest. We have seen the tropical wet and the tropical semi-evergreen and evergreen forest. The World Forestry Day, how it is not that only one day has to be recognized as a World Forestry Day, every day should be celebrated as an Environment Day or a Forestry Day, but it is basically to educate the people about the importance of forests and how forests play an important role, and they are the lifeline on which the biodiversity exists and the lifeline on which human civilization itself exists. So that is why forests are a national wealth of the country and of the world as a whole, and they need to be conserved, restored also by afforestation programs, and respected as an important, an integral part of the ecosystem.